On behalf of the Ignite Ministry, my name is Jez, and I'd like to welcome you all here to tonight's Multiply service. Our purpose here today is to serve, I guess you can call it an information session, as we will be sharing with you what is what do you call it? A collective work between young adults of multiple churches.
Kind of shaky.
Alright. So an encounter that's always been happening to us for the past couple of years since Ignite started back in 2018. You always get the parents and the elders of other churches asking us, sure, but what is Ignite about? And even halfway through our planning process, we still get them asking, okay, but what is Ignite about? So we are having this information session today, and it will be recorded. Thank you. This will be passed on to the other churches, going as far as Vietnamese churches, far in Toronto, Scarborough, Saga, Brampton. So just getting the word out there. And the verse that we always like to go off on is Romans 12:11. That's usually our go-to for Ignite. Never let the fire in your heart go out. Keep it alive. Serve the Lord. So straight, when people ask us, what is Ignite? Ignite is an assembly of young adults who seek to grow in their relationships with God. These are people who had their own individual encounters, their own adventures that led them to the point in which they are pursuing and growing in their personal relationships with God. So Ignite is not a separation of the church. It is an extension of the churches which these adults represent. I'm talking about CPMI, PIBC, MFBC. So as a group, we want to bring our youths from our own churches together to show them what we have learned through a Christ-driven community and reflecting our relationships with God and our relationships with others. Bottom line, I'm saying is me, as I go through my day, I learn something about God, I sit someone for coffee, I learn something from them. Well, what am I going to do? I want to be able to tell my younger youths. Emmanuel feels the same way, Charmaine feels the same way, CJ feels the same way for his own youth. So we as young adults who have already been through that phase of elementary and high school and been through that phase of relationships and looking for a job and living life and asking all those questions about God, we don't want to leave our youth hanging. Well, let me put it like this. Have you ever thought about why your parents tell you to do stuff? They're always so serious about making sure that you passed and that you did what you were supposed to do. I thought the same. I was thinking about why would my dad do all these things to tell me to do so many things and try and take the opportunities that come my way. Well, I realized the reason your parents want you to do all these things is that they want to make sure that you're okay at the end. Simply put, your parents will not be there with you at the end. And we want to be doing the same thing for our youths as young adults. That even though we may be gone, we would instill the love for God and the knowledge of God in our young people in our churches. So I'm pretty solid with how this looks. It may go a bit of tweaks in wording, but it's pretty solid throughout. So the vision of Ignite. To ignite and flourish each other's relationship with God. So both on a personal level and a community level, that we can support each other's relationships with God. We are committed to using the gospel through discipleship and evangelism to grow and equip a community of people so that they too can help flourish their own communities in the work to build God's kingdom. You ever have those churches and they're just focused on the people within their building when in the end they should go out and help the other communities? It's like a big spider web. That's what we're meant to do. Fire grows here, then the fire spreads, and then it gets bigger, and then it catches fire elsewhere, and then it spreads, gets bigger. And then, so the cycle repeats as we continue to grow God's kingdom. So going a bit more into what we do. This particular picture was taken at our most recent retreat. It was called Ignite Into the Deep. And during Saturday worship session in the evening, I was working the soundboard while everyone else was singing praise, and I never saw like such raw emotion portrayed in it. I never took a photo with such expression and emotion placed into it, because as you can see, even though they were together as a group, everyone's eyes were closed. Why? Because they were making it a very, very personal commitment with the words that were coming out of their mouths. And I like it. Using the group events to help with your intimacy with God. So here's what we do. It's all about being relational. No matter how much you try to be alone in life, you're always going to need to go to the store, you're going to meet somebody, you're going to need help to do something, you're going to need to talk to somebody to ask your questions. Life is all about, it's filled with lots about like relationships. So, our targets and goals. This was the Ignite crew for this year. You'll see representatives from like Bramley Baptist Church. You'll see like Audrey, CJ, Greg. Our targets and goals: consistent discipleship inside and outside of Ignite. So at Ignite, we tend to get 3 types of audiences. And in these 3 audiences, we realize we want to be able to cater to what they are looking for or what they need spiritually. When you think about discipleship, we see there's like a fence, okay? There's the majority of our youth who are already like on this side of the fence, go to church, already pursuing their relationships with God, and they're already like trying to step up as leaders. There's people who are on the fence, they go to church, but they're still iffy about like where they're gonna put their beliefs. And there's people on the other side of the fence who come to Ignite like, I don't even know what Christianity is. So our goal in terms of discipleship, it's like evangelize, help those who are like off the fence at least get onto the fence. Those who are like on the fence to affirm their faith, and those who are already off the fence, like Gideon and Jai and Rachel, like to step up as leaders growing in their faith. You okay? Yeah. Sorry, no, those are very good examples. Like they're wonderful. They're great. So, getting down into the big grit, we at Ignite tend to focus on 2 major events per year. It might not sound like a lot, maybe we'll make it 3 or 4, but what this initially started off with it was a retreat. Ignite was initially visualized as a retreat. Everyone lives their lives for the rest of the year, then at the beginning of or during the March break, we get down for 3 to 4 days, bring our youths together, and get refocused on God, hence the word ignite. Because when you go living through life, your spiritual life is always like getting attacked. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes you feel like God's silent, sometimes you're getting confused on what decisions to make next. So being able to bring our young people together and show them a community where there are other people who are actually going through quite similar things. It helps relate both on a spiritual and personal level, knowing that you're not alone in the struggles that you're going through. And that there's no need to be ashamed or hiding the flaws that you've got. It's quite human to have flaws. Don't be concerned about covering them up. So remember I said there was the majority of our youth who are already like on this side of the fence, some people who are on the fence, and then some newcomers who are on the other side that we're trying to, share and evangelize and show love to. We want to be able to take our youth retreats as a spiritual training ground, a place to be vulnerable, a place for spiritual exercise, where our youths who already, are already like stepping up as leaders and pursuing their relationships with God can help grow by serving the new people who are coming to these retreats. The timeline here for 2020, we'd be focusing on foundational truths. I'm talking, if I were to go up to you and you're already on your deathbed, and I just want to check up on you, I'm not going to ask, hey, were you dancing at church? Were you wearing earrings at church? That's not the most important thing. When I say foundational truths, I'd be thinking about, did you honestly believe that trusting Jesus was the only way for you to get to heaven? That it really wasn't based on the works you did or the amount of people that liked you? Those are foundational truths. That the inerrancy of the Bible, that there's nothing in here that's contradicting, that's a foundational truth. We fill our youth retreats with testimonies, devotionals, team building, and evangelism training. So we do try to keep our demographic spread. You'll often hear the words discipleship and evangelism always following each other throughout any of our events. So we want to be teaching leading into application, because when the event ends, we want you to be able to start applying into your daily lives the changes necessary for more fruitful, healthy living and prosperity. So we've only had 2 Ignite retreats so far. First one was in 2018. Ignite into the Deep was this year. So you can see that we are really focused on being relational. Despite the age differences between people, we do have that one commonality, share God. That's got to be accessible to everybody. We also do some games, we did a bucket challenge where we pranked a lot of our leaders by hiding Emmanuel's head underneath a bucket. Food challenges, I don't know what they're doing down there. So after the retreat, I was trying to think, what can we possibly do after an event? What's an idea of follow-up? I was like, oh, I know. Let's have another event. That makes sense. When you have one event and you want to be able to follow up with people, let's have another event. Don't worry, that wasn't the only answer. So what we have here is called the Ignite Reunion. We usually book a church for one day, a small retreat for 10 hours or so. These reunions are more so for workshops in addition to the devotions and the testimonies. Focus more on equipping and living with God, by God, through God, and for God. In other words, God's way, through God's power, and for God's purposes and glory. So these reunions following the retreats were our spring events. Our reunions are more like our summer events. The one we had this year was at the beginning of July when school ended. And we always, from there, we continued the aspect of keeping the conversation going. Because you're never going to stop growing, you're never going to stop facing problems, and God's never going to stop being there. Do the math. The answer following, what happens in between the events, because the struggle was we put people on a spiritual high. They feel happy for a few days, and then they kind of drop off back into their regular struggle on their own, dealing with school, dealing with stresses of work, inner doubts, inner turmoil, you name it. It wasn't really good to just have a retreat, just have an event that only served people for a couple of days, when there's 365 days in a year where they can grow, where they are either growing or declining. They say if you want to be prosperous for like a year, grow rice. If you want to be prosperous for like 100 years, grow trees. If you want to prosper for 1,000 years, you grow people. It's a call of God that we love people, that we prepare for God's kingdom, and by me pouring specifically to at least one other person, then that person can reach another person. If I only pour into someone for a day, they're going to dry up pretty quickly by the time we have the next retreat. So no wonder we call it Ignite. It means we have to start all over again. But the point is, you light the fire, you get saved, but sanctification, becoming holy, is something that happens every day as you get closer and closer to becoming the person that God wants you to be. So throughout the year, and this is what we will be planning, we like to be continuing the discipleship. When we start something through an event, we continue it until we continue it in between. So these are the things you're going to be looking for if you're being discipled or if you're discipling someone. You gotta ask yourself, who is God to you? How do you share God? Did you share God? If so, do it again. Now, you could be going to events, you can be meeting up with people one-on-one, you could be having small groups. You'll know if you're being discipled well if you're getting these things. Are you being discipled through the Word of God, through living, leading, and evangelizing? If you are feeding these different aspects, then I can say you are being discipled well. So, that was Ignite in a nutshell, but I'd like to put your attention towards our next event. So the Ignite Retreat of 2020 was for the young people from all our churches, but don't worry, it's not just for Christians. Do invite your friends. If you think someone wants to see what a good community looks like, a God-driven community where people love each other in a way that glorifies God, that there's a way to be vulnerable, there's a way to love, there's a way to have friends, there's a way to live life. We want to be able to show you what that community looks like in a safe environment setting, so that you guys can also duplicate it in your own churches and in your own friend groups. So this is for the young people. What are we going to be doing? Growing in their relationship with God and with each other. When's it going to be happening? Well, we're going to be aiming for the beginning of the March break. Where? We'll see. And why? This should be the answer to why you do anything, guys. Because it glorifies God. So here's the part that I'm trying to reach out to many of you guys personally for. Right now, the core ministry consists of 3 people. So there are three different categories of roles: a ministry lead, an event lead, and a program lead. Ministry leads, they look over the vision, they scope out all the events, the timeline as a whole, and does everything that happens filter to that vision, we maintain it. So think of the events as small objectives, but the years to come, that's like the overall goal. Events leads, that's more so like, here I am in charge of this one particular event, the retreat, not the ministry as a whole, just in charge of this one retreat. That's what an event lead is. Program leads, it could be a praise and worship leaders, sound system leader, the person in charge of advertising. You're in charge of that part, that particular aspect for the event. That's what a program lead is. It's kind of like a pyramid. Everything gets filtered down as long as everything focuses on that vision. So the particular roles that we have in Ignite: coordinators, those are definitely the event leads. We are looking for a worship team, so if you know anyone who has a heart for music, glorifying God through worship. Advertising team, we do have a lot of video promos if you follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages. Games masters, we always try to be creative, especially when it comes to team building exercises. Equipment, sound, lights, crew, color team leaders, you've seen them before. That's what a lot of our young adults will be going into, like Isabel and Greg. We are looking for nurses, first aids, bus transportation, a venue communicator, a registration team, and a videographer / photography team. So those are the roles that we have going into Ignite. Okay, so here's what our adventure is going to be looking like for the next few months. Today is the information session. October, me and the two other ministry leads, CJ and Charmaine, we are going to be looking for Ignite leaders. Don't worry, our commitment to Ignite as ministry leads is going to be for a few years. Your particular involvement, it could be for one event, it could be for a certain X amount of time. We can definitely talk about that in terms of involvement. So October, we will be scouting Ignite leaders. We are looking for people who have a heart for youth, discipleship, pouring into other people. Because if you know something so good and there's so much of it to go around for other people, why wouldn't you want to share it? People who are not perfect, but definitely looking to grow in their personal relationship with God and show that to others. That's what I'm looking for in an Ignite leader. We'll be scouting hands-on adult support because God knows we need mentorship in this group. We are young adults. We will be planning the content for the year in October, and when November comes, we will be sharing that. And we'll also be location scouting for the next retreat. When November comes, we will be having our very first planning meeting in terms of program. The content in terms of message would have already ideally be done by then. Our Ignite leader meetings will also be used as leadership training. Why would you want to be in Ignite? How do you disciple someone? How do you correct someone lovingly? Or how do you encourage someone lovingly? That's leadership training. And our advertising will begin in November. Come December, we are hoping to lock down the price for the venue, the food, the transportation, supplies. We would have spent November getting in touch with all these churches in this adventure by then. January, we will do registration collection. And then, of course, March, we will ramp up the meetings of leadership training, and we will have Ignite Retreat 2020. And then here's the fun part that comes after an event, the follow-up, which is lovingly called the lifeline in between retreats, in between events. Because when you start something up and it's so good, you have to keep it going for the benefit of others and for the benefit of the glory of God. So you call someone up, hey, can we meet up for coffee? You want to have a confirmation of faith. You want to teach them how to share their faith, make new friends, and then you prepare those people and their friends for the next retreat. That's discipleship. That's small group. And then the cycle repeats. 2021, we have another retreat. So by schedule, it's repetitive. But in terms of goals, discipleship, that's always going to continue to progress. You'll be able to find us on our Facebook page. We also have a Gmail account and Instagram. You'll find that a lot of the leaders that we have on board are very photogenic. And I just want you guys to know that this ministry as a whole it's a nice ministry, lovely purpose. But if the Ignite ministry ever died, like, I tell you this now, the Ignite as a whole isn't important. But the purpose of it, of building others and growing others, that purpose will still exist. If you want to know like what to aim for in life, why you should do anything, you'll be able to encapsulate it all within this verse. In Matthew 28:19-20, it says here, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." That's what we do in our personal living. That's what we're doing with this ministry. Some churches don't have youth leaders. Some churches only have 1 or 2 youth, and they'd like to find a community. And I'm telling you that there are others out there just like you who are asking heavy questions, who are looking for peace, who are looking for what to do with their lives. Keep asking those hard questions. There is a community out there that exists. If a church is one community, imagine what will happen if all these communities got together for God's glory. So, as great as an event is, that's what it is, a one-time thing. I don't put all my eggs into that one basket. Church, community, it's a community gathering. But meeting up one-on-one for coffee, meeting up with just 2 or 3 people for a small group, that's where you will be able to address your own inner struggles. That there is a way to go about dealing with the things that you face in life. So that is what God has placed in the hearts of me, Charmaine, and CJ. And we just want to share that vision with you guys of loving God, knowing that there is a place for community, that there is a place to be vulnerable, that there's a way to go about doing all this for your own prosperity, knowing that the troubles you have now are achieving for you an eternal glory, and that there isn't a good thing that God wouldn't keep away from you. If it wasn't good, He wouldn't give it to you. If it is good, He will send it your way. Thank you.